Checking that everything is right. It looks like we are good. Little Rugby Muscle logo instead of the sky. And just as I started recording, it started raining. Just going to check for one more second. If you're already watching this video, you can skip ahead 10 seconds or so. But it appears that we might be good to go. I found that in good time. Usually doesn't take this long, so I'm hoping we're all good. And even if we're not, this is going to go on the podcast, so here we go. Let me just check real quick. Yes, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another brand new Rugby Muscle podcast, Facebook Q&A edition. I'm your host as always, TJ, and today, as you can see, decided to do it on my balcony because this will be the last Q&A edition that I record, or last podcast at all that I record, well, at least this year here in the Dominican Republic. And I've had a few requests for palm trees. I'd rather have really good questions that I can rattle through, but I have had a few requests for palm trees, so I decided we'll do this out on a balcony today. It almost looks photoshopped. It looks like it's not even real, but it is real. And this is today's podcast, where we will be rattling through questions that you guys have asked on the Rugby Muscle Athletes Facebook page. So essentially, I've already got the questions been given to me. If you are watching this live, absolutely pop a question in the comments below and I will get to it today. If you are watching this a little bit later on the YouTubes, give it a thumbs up. If you're watching this if you're watching this on the Facebook, also give it a thumbs up right now because it helps out the feed. Comments also help out the feed. All the algorithms will work in my favor if you can help me out. Unfortunately, we had a big influx of new members last week. None of them asked a question, so they all got kicked out of the group, because that's how it works. You're not, you don't need more information. You don't need to just to lurk in another group. That doesn't help you. You need to figure out exactly what you want to do and you execute. I'm not around to fluff anybody's pillows here on the Rugby Muscle Athletes Facebook page or on the Rugby Muscle podcast. I'm here to give you actual information that will help. And a lot of people don't want to hear that information right now. They want to just constantly get their pillow fluffed and someone to rub their belly and tell them how special they are. But in my opinion, that is not doing anybody any good. I think it's just sort of sacrificing what actually you can achieve in the long term by just doing, by just feeling a little bit happier in the short term. Let me just get a little bit more comfortable. As always, 5-star reviews on the podcast channels are much appreciated. I have been asked about how to give 5-star reviews. I think I will put in a link in the show notes now. I'll start putting in links, but they need to be done either on Apple Podcasts or on Stitcher Podcasts. Those are the two that help or at least from what I know, those are the two podcast review places where you can give 5 stars. Apple Podcasts is by far the best because it properly bumps up the RSS feed. You don't want to get into the technical aspects of it. You just want to know where you can go and give. So Stitcher.com, or just type Rugby Muscle Stitcher, or you can type in Rugby Muscle Podcast. On Google, if you don't have Apple Podcasts, you could just type it on Google, and that will bring up the Rugby Muscle Podcast. Because if you just type Rugby Muscle Podcast, it will be the top thing that comes up. Just give it a 5-star review on there, unless you, for some reason, don't have an Apple account, which would be weird, because who doesn't have an Apple account right now, you'd be weird if that was you, but, it's okay to be weird. Now, speaking of being okay to be weird, this intro's got a little bit weird, so let's get into the podcast, shall we? Let's get into the questions. Shout outs to the guys that are joining us live. Hope we're all doing great. And I hope this isn't like rubbing it in. It did just rain here, so not that I'm complaining about the weather, but is what it is. Okay, first question is a follow-up from last week where Hamilton says, good info, so I'll look into the information about Fat Burning 101 and 102 podcasts. I'm not seeing on the group or YouTube yet. Yeah, they're not uploaded yet. That's why you're not seeing them there. They will be there very shortly. Maybe by the time this one's on Apple Podcasts, it will be. I'm looking to put on about 4 kilos of muscle in the next few months, so we shall see. I didn't think I was eating too much. So I guess the question is how to balance that. If my goal is to gain a couple of kilos of muscle, 3 to 4 over the next few months, that'd be great. Then do I need to eat enough to feel okay and smart and not overdo it? So essentially, if you're looking down and you've got a belly, I would not worry about trying to gain kilograms of muscle. Yes, you can still gain muscle, but I wouldn't worry about like gaining outright kilograms of muscle. I wouldn't try and like negotiate the weight. If you try and figure out how much weight of muscle you want to get, plus you take that, then you take that away from your the muscle that you're, or the fat that you're supposed to be burning, it just gets more and more confusing. It gets a lot more difficult to sort of there's more noise and more interference in the signal that you're trying to not only send your body, which is lose weight, but like on your own course. Like you're trying to plot a course of weight loss because you're trying to get rid of this belly. So the scale should be heading down. Now, if you argue to me, well, actually, I still want to gain muscle, absolutely, but the rate of muscle gain, as we've spoken to, several times now, and we've gone over at least a couple times in the Rugby Muscle or in the Muscle Building Hypertrophy 101 podcasts. Like, if you gain 1 kilo every 2 to 3 months of lean mass, that's great, right? But if you're to lose 1 kilo every 2 to 3 months of fat, like, that would be pretty shit, right? So you should still be in a net loss if you're gaining muscle. You could still absolutely train in order to build that muscle. You can still train hypertrophy methods, and if you add in volume, you do sufficient volume, you increase the weights, and you continue to progress as you should, then there's a very good chance that you will be still building muscle in that deficit. It just becomes a lot harder. So it's not to say that if you want to gain muscle, you should be in a surplus because it's the only way to gain muscle. It's more to say that you should just get rid of, you should stop having that monkey on your back of, I'm a little bit overly fat, I'm a little bit overweight, so I've got to try and gain muscle whilst losing fat, or I've got to gain muscle, but I don't want to get too fat. Like, just get lean first. That then helps out every other issue, in my opinion. On top of that, let's address the fact that you said I'm not eating too much. It's not me saying that you're eating too much. It's the scale saying that you're eating too much, because the scale has given you an output of how much you weigh, and that's it. So more often than not, when people say that, it's usually because, number one, they're either eating like really calorie dense foods and not realizing it. So for example, they're eating like real heavy breads that they think are healthy, granolas. What else could you say? I don't know, maybe you're frying your food in quite a bit of oil. Maybe you're just eating juices, and you're just eating a lot more food than the actual, or a lot more calories than the actual weight of food would suggest. Maybe you're not eating too many vegetables. Maybe you love rice. Like, there are lots of different foods that you can get in. Peanut butter is a perfect example. Peanut butter, right? You can overestimate by like 500, or underestimate, sorry, by like 500 calories, because you could just say, I'm going to have a teaspoon. You heap up that teaspoon, it gets a lot bigger. That can seriously add in a lot of calories without you really realizing it. So you're not necessarily saying that you're eating quote unquote too much, but you're eating too much because the scale is like, that's why I like the scale. It's not emotional, it's not judging you, it's literally just saying this is how much mass you have. Now, whether it's fat mass, muscle mass, that's not for it to decide. If you are to decide whether you want to continue to lose fat and or gain weight, or build muscle, or whatever your goal is, right? So if you are someone that's got a bit of a belly, I would focus on getting rid of that belly first. I wouldn't worry. You can gain muscle, but the focus of your diet won't be about gaining muscle. The training will be about gaining muscle. The diet will be about losing weight and or losing fat, losing mass, and that way you're able to stay a lot more, focused on that, getting rid of that belly. Then once you've got rid of that belly and once you've got a nice little lean frame, then there's absolutely nothing to suggest that you cannot pump up the volume and pump up the calories, pump up the volume, pump up the base, bounce. No, pump up the carbohydrates that you're taking in, and then getting into a bit of a surplus and trying to gain maybe a kilo or so a month. The problem I find with that, people that try to gain weight too fast, particularly this happens with larger gentlemen, people that guys that are naturally bigger people. They've maybe they finally lost weight, or maybe they still battle with trying to keep their body weight in check or trying to keep their belly in check. More often than not, the second you sort of let the leash off and you say, right, it's time to gain muscle, you're like, okay, great, boom, and they gain 5 kilos in 3 weeks. You're not going to gain 5 kilos in 3 weeks of muscle. You're not even going to gain 1 kilo in 3 weeks of muscle, probably. So you've then shot yourself in the foot, because now all that time that you could have spent 5 months, 6 months in a calorie surplus trying to slowly gain muscle and support that, tissue accruement, the gaining of tissue to support the hypertrophy, to support that muscle mass that you're trying to add to your frame. You could have done that for 6 months, at least 3 months off and on, a couple periods of 3 months, and you could have spent the whole year, or as much of the year as you can, in a calorie surplus to gain muscle. Now you've wasted all of that because you've got too fat in 3 weeks. Now you've got to worry about losing the fat again, and that's just a ball ache. So better to be disciplined on the front end when it comes to gaining that muscle. Eating enough to feel okay, just measure it. This is why I'm such a big fan, and it's if you want to do it right. And if you want to do it right, track your calories. Just figure out how much you're eating. Don't guesstimate. Don't figure out, am I okay now? Am I gaining enough? Get an idea of how many calories you're ingesting, get an idea of your daily fluctuations of body weight, or your average weekly body weight, and then from there it's really easy, right? Because now you've got data, you've got constant data that you can adjust. There's no guessing anymore. Now there's okay, it's been 3 weeks and the scale hasn't shifted. I guess I need to chop some extra calories off of however much I'm eating, or I guess I need to be more active. I guess I need to make a change. Likewise, if you're actually doing quite good, you're losing a kilo a week or half a kilo a week, there's no need to press the alarm bell and go, crap, this isn't working how I thought it was. I should just make myself starve or whatever, or maybe I need a cheat day to boost the metabolism. All that comes in from not having enough data on the front end. So get some data on the front end, and then you're able to actually succeed in your in a long-term calorie gain. And that pretty much sort of nails that question for you there, Hamilton. Again, love to keep this and continue this week to week. There's absolutely no reason that we can't, if you have any more questions for me on that. Corie is the next asker of questions, and he says, I'm 32, been playing rugby for 12 years now in the pack. I'd like to continue playing good rugby till old age takes its toll. Been listening to the podcast on Castbox for a few months, but I'm not sure how to leave a 5-star review on it. Yeah, this is what I was talking about earlier. Just go and do it on Apple Podcasts, please. That is massive. And also, another thing that you guys can do is just screenshot it and share it on your Instagram stories, or put it on your Instagram. That massively helps out as well. Social media, obviously, is a big thing in 2020 and 2021. It's going to be just as big a thing. And spreading the show out on social media does help the show grow. We just get more listeners. If you've got mates that are rugby players, hopefully they'll listen, and then it just spreads it, because I've never spent a single cent trying to advertise this podcast. It's just I see a need for it. There's so many amateur rugby players that have no direction, and semi-professionals as well, that people just don't understand how to do this stuff. So I really feel like there is a need, and so if you want to help out your mates, helps me out too. biggest thing I've taken away from your podcast so far is don't believe the hype. Yeah, see, there you go. Would you suggest any circuits I can get away with at work? No. He gives more details. He said, I work a 12-hour shift. Just wondering if this would be beneficial. I keep some equipment close. Brute bad, blah, 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 blah. No. So I've actually just had a call with Corie, so you know the answer to this because we had this on your call as you started with Rugby Muscle Elite. But essentially, I think this is one of those things where the amount of dedicated guys that I deal with that just try and do too much, and I say dedicated, it can even be fairly loosely, but they do too much. Like you wouldn't, if you were to try and let me think about. There's no way of giving this as a perfect example. I guess, like, if you had a job where they never told you had to work like certain hours, you never had to go. They just said, just work when you feel like it. Just do a little bit here and there. Like, it wouldn't be efficient. Like, even me, like I run Rugby Muscle, I do it by myself. I still set myself hours that I've got to focus in on and do work, and I don't distract myself with other things. I don't do 3 minutes here and there or 10 minutes here and there. It just doesn't work. If I want to work efficiently, I'll sit down for 1, 2, 4 hours and I'll knock out as much work as I can. Likewise, when you're trying to train, like, it's better just to completely engage in it. So to just you don't need any more than 3 to 5 sessions a week. You can do, and that would be there are definitely benefits that you can have from it. But to just keep piling more and more and more on your plate, firstly, it's gonna overwhelm you. So there's gonna get to, no matter how much progress you make, you're gonna get to a point where you can't sustain that because you're not as motivated, as disciplined. Life gets in the way. So if you're on a much easier plan, life is less likely to get in the way. That way you can stay more consistent, and if you can stay more consistent in the long term, you're going to get better results. On top of that, just doing random circuits, there's no set goal, so it's a lot harder to stay consistent because of your energy of doing those training sessions. But it's a lot more difficult to measure it. It's just a lot easier to have your gym sessions, take those seriously. All right, so when it's time for the gym, you've blocked off 2 hours because you're going to take 20 minutes to go there, 20 minutes to come back, maybe a shower afterwards, or maybe you spend an hour, just over an hour of training, or just around an hour, maybe 45 minutes training. You got your warm up, you got your cool down. You've blocked out 2 hours. Also, you can give or take that from your own personal schedule. That is your time to train. That's not the time to fuck around on your phone. That's not the time to do some other research. That's not the time to figure out what you've actually got to do to train. This is all your time where you're going to focus on, being a fucking savage, like taking care of business, ticking those boxes, like executing to the best of your ability. Then, you go home and you go about your day, and you do that for a few weeks, and then you see how you're progressing, and then you keep. You adjust. If someone that wants to lose weight, you adjust your calories, as I said earlier already in this podcast. You just adjust the calories after that. If you're just randomly doing circuits and maybe you actually have a couple times, a couple weeks where you're really busy, now you're not going to lose the weight, and now your total daily energy expenditure goes down because of the fact that you're actually busy at work. Like, it's not a reliable thing to keep. And on top of that, sorry, before we keep going, on top of that, right, you want to focus on your training sessions and you want to go to the best of your ability. If you're randomly, between sessions doing circuits that are also tiring you out, and you're someone that's, in a calorie deficit, you're losing weight, you're just going to feel extra fatigued from these sessions. And yes, you'll get, maybe a few hundred calories of burned fat, or you've burnt a few extra 100 calories, but just be better just to not eat that extra 100 or so calories. For the fatigue cost, it's just not worth it. So I would just focus on the training sessions. If you wanted to burn a few, maybe not a few extra 100, right, but you'd burn a few more calories, feel a little bit fresher, feel a little bit less lethargic, just go for walks. It sounds like, I'm a 32-year-old athlete. What am I doing going for a walk? Like, you wouldn't believe it. Like, just keeping a decent enough pace for that walk. That's what we're supposed to do as humans. We're not supposed to sit down for 18 hours or 12 hours or 8 hours even in a day consecutively. We're supposed to be moving around looking for food. Now, we don't need to look for food, but there's absolutely no reason that every few hours you can't just get up and go for a 10-20 minute walk. Not only is that just going to be good for your digestion, it's going to be good for your calorie. Obviously it's going to give you a little bit of calorie burn. I'm not going to lie to you and say that it's going to give you infinite calorie burn, but it's going to do something. It's going to get the heart moving. It's going to get the blood flow, and it's more importantly, it's not going to take away from your sessions. If you want to be a good athlete and a good player, you want to make sure that your 4 training sessions are of absolute quality. You don't want to tank a couple of those sessions because you randomly did some circuits every now and again. Like, we've all had those training sessions where we've tried to squat or we've tried to get in a good lift after a Tuesday session of rugby where the coach has made you do like countless amounts of fitness. And you just think, what's the fucking point of this? This is stupid. Like, we pushed it way too hard yesterday. Like, and you feel like you've wasted a week. You don't want to waste weeks. You want to make sure that you can tick the box for as many consecutive weeks as possible. And so, all of which is to say, no, I do not think it's worthwhile to do that. Now, those pieces of equipment, how can you get the best value out of those? What did he say? He listed the equipment he has. Let me find it. So he said he's got a strongman brute bag, kettlebells, dumbbells, band. So, okay, number one, what you can do is, I don't know about your area where you are, but a lot of areas are still locked down and people are still trying to buy gym equipment for their home gym. Make some money. If you've got gym membership, like, none of that stuff is overly necessary. Maybe you keep the bands, but or other than that, you could absolutely keep that stuff at home, and maybe you do a circuit, maybe not at work, but you do one circuit training session a week, and that's one of your 4 or 5 training sessions. That's one of the sessions that you take seriously. You don't just do it on a whim. All right, we'll move on now to Iain. Congratulations on the 200th episode. You mentioned carb loading 6 grams per kilogram of carbs before a game. Should this be a daily target to always be loaded, or is there added benefit in the muscles being somewhat depleted for training, then full of energy for the game? For this, I'm assuming one can fit 6 grams per kilo of carbohydrates into daily calories macro targets. That is absolute wishful thinking, dude. Like, no. So, the most efficient way, or the most efficient way in terms of calories that the body will try and keep your glycogen stores up, is by just over time burning more of your fat stores and then replacing them into your, and they put them and they store them into the muscle, if that makes sense. So your stored energy that was stored as fat gets repurposed and stored back into the muscle, ready for you to, it's what you do. If you were to not eat for 5 days and then go for a sprint, you wouldn't just pass out. You would still be able to sprint, and that's not because your muscles are depleted, and they're still able to perform. It's because you've been able to slowly over time, and this is what you do. Like, you burn it's why you burn fat whilst not, you burn more fat, not necessarily just in the quote-unquote fat burning zone. You can burn your muscle glycogen, and then your body uses the fat storage to then replace that muscle glycogen. Now, the reason for having 6 grams per kilogram of carbohydrate before a game is because you want to make sure that you are fully not repleted. What's the opposite of depleted? You're fully loaded, right? You've got all of your stores, so that you've got no wasted energy storage on your body for fast access for energy. Now, you don't, if you're someone that's trying to lose fat especially, you don't want to have that. You want to be constantly trying to empty the muscles of glycogen, so that, well, not constantly, but on a weekly scale, you want to be consistently trying to deplete the muscles of their glycogen, so that you keep having to burn that fat to replace those glycogen stores. Likewise, even if you're trying to gain muscle, you want to deplete them literally just to add muscle and to rebuild the tissue. As the body's rebuilding that tissue, you're ingesting more carbohydrate. You then try and store that more as much as you can in the muscle, and then you're able to grow it. But it's not like you don't burn your muscle glycogen just walking around doing nothing, right? It's only in there if you want quick action of a high intensity nature. Otherwise, your body's just going to be quite chill, burn some from the liver, and then slowly replace it with the fat. It's only and that's a process that is constantly going on. If you had to play a game of rugby though, and you just don't have the time to burn those fat stores, your body doesn't have the time, nor does it have I guess manpower is a bad word, but the priority, I should say, right? If you're playing rugby and it's an 80-minute game, your body is dedicated to being as fit. It's also the same reason that you don't want fats and vegetables in your digestive system whilst you're playing. You want your body's resources to be used to fuel your muscle, to get your muscles firing, to keep you going, to keep you playing that game at the best intensity you can. If you're wasting blood flow trying to digest food, that's a bad thing. If you're wasting blood flow trying to process fat storage to then slowly sort of convert that into glucose to then use that as energy, it's a roundabout slow process. It's not going to work for a game of rugby. That's the reason that you want to make sure that you are carved up before a game. Now, once you say for instance you did deplete yourself, you're a 100 kilo athlete that burnt through 600 grams of carbohydrates. Again, that by the way is a lot. You managed to do that, right? You had a really tough game. Now ideally you're going to replenish that with some sort of carbohydrate stores, but over time you're still going to be able to run and sprint or whatever even after you've hit the wall, probably the next day, right? And that's because your body then burns more fat and puts it back in the muscle so that you're ready to go. If you ate that 600, if you ate the 600 grams for the 100 kilo athlete, you ate all of those carbs and then you did nothing and you sat in your ass, the body's going to be like, oh, we don't need all of this storage. It will take it out of the liver. It will take it out of your muscles. Particularly if you eat more, or anything that's more will then also be stored as fat, and it will then store as fat. So it's a long, constant balance. And so what we're really doing in terms of the carb load is just more of an insurance policy. We want to make sure that we can completely saturate our muscle storage. Okay, so that we can properly perform at our best come game day. Now, I'm assuming one can fit into the daily calories and macro targets. So the way I always say it is to spread those 6 grams per kilo throughout the day before. And then you can gauge it upon there's different ways that you can play it depending on different goals. If you're someone that wants to gain weight, or if you're someone that wants to perform at their best every single week and you're in season, you're not worried about the weight loss, you could potentially have a free day after that Saturday, and just judge it yourself. If you played a real hard game, you could go and have you can really try and replenish as much of those stores as you can, but not binge, but have a good feed because you've earned it. Likewise, if you feel like you did nothing, then probably don't go and have that big feed, because then that big feed is going to go into a system that's already saturated and be stored as fat. You don't want that. Likewise, if you're someone that is trying to lose fat, I would just set calorie targets, and what I would do is I would just move those calorie targets. You've got your weekly carbohydrate or calorie allotment, right? I would just bias most of those carbohydrates, or at least 600 grams of those carbohydrates, or 6 grams per kilogram of carbohydrates, towards that Friday and Saturday. And therefore, again, you make sure that you are completely saturated with energy stores, but then you also throughout the week will deplete yourself and lose that fat. Now, how fast you lose that weight will then depend on how much we refuel and how hard you work out. And if you're feeling like shit, then it's a different, you got to sort of look at yourself and figure out how you can lose weight slower in season. But yeah, it's like I said, it's a big reason that this is, whilst we're in lockdown, is a fantastic time for us really to make progress, because we don't have to worry about this fucking headache of having to figure out how to lose weight or gain muscle whilst having a game of rugby every week. It just adds, like, yes, it's awesome, and absolutely, like, we want to get back into playing rugby, but it's just a lot of noise, you know, and it gets out of the way. I mean, it's out of the way now that we're or now that there is no rugby. Okay, so in terms of making progress, this is a great time. In terms of actually enjoying rugby and having doing cool shit every week, maybe it's not the greatest time. But you got to take the silver lining with that cloud. I'm out of coffee. All right, we've got 2 more questions, and we will hopefully wrap this up fairly shortly. Next we have my man Fitlete Nation, GP3, who says, who are the flat earthers of the fitness industry? That's a hilarious question. It's a great question. So I guess what you were trying to say is people that think they're really quote unquote woke, but are just annoyed. I mean, I guess this is how I want to interpret it. So first and foremost, I'd say, let's go with steroid accusers. People that say everyone is on steroids, everyone cheats, everyone, you cannot possibly be 100 kilograms and be fairly lean without taking a boatload of steroids. There's no way you can even look good. How can you get a tan? You must be on steroids. They're like, those people are definitely the flat, because they don't understand that, like, if you were someone that lived in Japan, or if you lived in, if you lived in Peru, when I went to Peru, I was legit like a foot taller than everyone else. Now imagine like someone from the NBA goes there, right, and they walk amongst everyone in Lima in Peru. They would think that person was a fucking alien. There's like, how is this person the same species as I am? Now, for some reason, fucking Dave down the gym. No, Dave. Now he's going to take offense to that. Not you, Dave. Random bloke down the gym, lifts a few weights for a couple years, thinks he knows everything, watches a few fucking Greg Doucette videos, or that guy moredates.com, watches a few videos that says everybody's on steroids, and now he thinks he fucking knows everything, and he's seen what the limit to human potential is, and so then he sees someone else that's jacked, and he's like, no way, that guy's on steroids, and then that guy can take fucking 3 different drug tests, be clean, and he's like, no way. What people must realize is, like, you look at the Pacific Islanders, and you look at even just how they play rugby, right? It doesn't make sense how well they play the game naturally compared to us fucking shitty white folk, right? We have to train our ass off, and so do they, but like the game comes a lot more natural to them. They perform at a great level. They are like, Jesus Christ, how well they perform on a world stage when you look at how big, some of their entire nation is less than most English cities, and they still are performing ridiculously well. If you look at every top league throughout the world, they are littered with Polynesian players because they have, superior genetics, and they have a unique talent. Now, some people just have a unique talent of being very jacked or being in shape, and you'll see it. Like, I remember I had a buddy when I was at school, and I was like, I couldn't have been older than like 10 or 11. This kid had like a tennis ball bicep, man. He had abs, and I was just like, this was back when I was fat, Tej. It was ridiculous. This kid was like in Hercules shape. Hadn't done a fucking push-up in his life. Hadn't done anything. He did no sport. But was just jacked. Now take that guy and have them do 10 years of like, fairly dedicated lifting, and you take that guy. That's just some guy that happened to be in my year in my school. Now you take the best of the best of the best of the best, and you put them on the internet. Yeah, they're going to look that much better, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're on steroids, right? So those people are the flat earthers for sure. Like, because you just cannot tell them like anything. I think another group of people I would say is either Let's go both ways, right? So number one, I'm plant-based. I eat fish, right? But I'm plant-based. Vegans, man, vegans, absolutely. Like they think they're like everything has to be like they're able to lift because they're vegan, even though someone that isn't vegan also lifts the exact same right next to them, or even lifts more. Like it becomes like a cult, and the same thing as keto people, right? Or fucking even better than keto people, right? The bulletproof guys. What the fuck is that all about, right? These people are absolutely the flat earthers because they, there's no science to it, but they think it's science. They cherry pick all of the, they ignore the thousands of studies, or however many, the overwhelming majority of studies that say, stay in a within calorie balance dictates, you absolutely dictates your body weight levels, and pretty much dictates how well your health markers are going to be, right? That's almost, unequivocally the sole overriding factor to every diet fucking ever, okay, is calorie balance. But keto people will ignore it, and they'll say, look at this one study out of 15 million says that keto's better, and then says that eating the brain runs on fats, which it doesn't. And then the complete same argument is made from the people at the complete opposite end, where they say, oh, see, look, high carbohydrate diets are the best. It doesn't matter for calories, just eat vegan, and if you don't eat meat, you're going to be. It's just like, if you two got in a room, like what would happen? Like, would the room explode, or would you make babies? And what the fuck would those babies eat? Would they just be? It's just so weird. Keto people and bulletproof people and vegans, absolutely also flat earthers, because again, they take enough science to back themselves, just like flat earthers, where they're like, oh no, look, I'm a guy of science, and then they run experiments, and then they run the experiment, and the experiment proves that the earth is round, and like, nope, we've got to try this again. You don't accept the science that goes against what you say, but you embrace and say you're science based because of the science that does support your claims. That's not how science works. But yeah, those are the groups of people. Maybe we'll throw powerlifters in there, because they love to find any reason to squat, bench, and deadlift, even if it is just absolutely not working for them, because they're part of a group. And I think I'll put Wim Hofers into this as well. Wim Hof is a special style of meditation. I made the mistake at one time of joining a Wim Hof Facebook group, and it just is really weird. I think essentially when you get a group of people that believe that they've, it becomes anything that to do with your training or your nutrition that becomes a little bit religious, right? It means that you then become attached to it in like an unhealthy way, right? And maybe I'm too far on the other end, where I'm fucking not attached to anything. Like there's nothing that I really believe in that you can then persuade me out of it by showing me enough data, and by persuading me, if you were to tell me I should never train legs again, right? And I'm balls deep. I'm 8 weeks, 10 weeks, maybe 9 weeks into a mainly leg focused hypertrophy, and it's rough, but I want to get my legs feel like they're like 8 feet long, and I'm only 6 foot tall. I feel like if you were to somehow persuade me that training in legs is somehow pointless, and you could do that, you could literally persuade me, and I'll be like, okay, I guess I'm not, that was a waste of my time. That's annoying. Won't train legs anymore. But now I've got more time to train upper body or something. I could be persuaded of anything if you give me a compelling argument, if you back it up with enough data. Like, I'll absolutely buy into that. Not that I want to be persuaded to not train legs. And that's how it should be. You should really not be attached to the methods. You should just be attached to results. Okay, last question is a troll question, but I'm going to answer it properly anyway, because Sean asks, how do I keep the body guessing? Don't try and troll me, because I will always come at it with an actual answer. So you keep the body guessing with strategic novelty. What do I mean by strategic novelty? I mean Dun, dun, dun. Periodization, planning your training. Especially for someone that wants to get better at rugby, you should have distinct phases of training and it's not keeping the body guessing. It's utilize. Well, so I guess that's not really answering the question, but it is, right? You don't keep the body guessing, but you consistently make small alterations, and you don't do this every week. You don't do this every training session. You do this every few months, where you like, for example, right now, my focus is on building as much lower body tissue as I can, right? Once I finish this phase, the amount of work I'll need to maintain it is a fraction of it. So now I can put my resources somewhere else, right? And that's kind of how you should always be treating your training, whether that's through body parts, like what I was specifically saying here, whether that's through strength work or power work or speed work. You constantly put as much of your resources into maybe 1 to 2, maybe 3 areas that you really want to improve for a few months. Put everything else on the back burner. That doesn't mean you ignore everything else. It means it's just on the back burner. You're not trying to improve it, although you can, but you're not trying to improve it. You're trying to improve those 1 to 2 specific things. Then, after a period of time, you've made a fast increase. You've got, made the progress. Your body's made as much adaptation as it wants to make. It's gone, right, look, come on, this is ridiculous. I can't keep adding more mass to this area. I can't keep adding more strength. It's only been a few months. Boom. You put that on maintenance. You switch it to something else. And that way, you're not really keeping the body guessing, but you're using all of the benefits that these twats that say they're keeping the body guessing do. You're changing your routine up enough that it keeps it mentally fresh. You keep a new challenge. You keep adjusting to train different systems or to train different parts of the body before the body really plateaus, before it makes that adjustment. You're constantly pushing something whilst it's novel. So you're taking advantage of novel stimulus for long enough to get quite fast and measurable gains in those areas. And therefore, you keep the body guessing. Boom. All right. Oh, I just burped right into the microphone. Amazing. That's an amazing way to finish the podcast. It's not an amazing way to finish the podcast. I've just blasted the live feed in my own ears. What a mess. But hopefully you guys appreciated that one. Hopefully you appreciated the background. It looks like it's photoshopped. Look, let me just prove to you it's not photoshopped. Oof. But yeah. It's here. This doesn't prove anything. I was going to shake the tree, and then I realised that the tree is like 3 meters away, so I'm not going to do that. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me on this podcast. It's been a pleasure to answer more of your questions. As always, you can ask any more questions on the Rugby Muscle Athletes Facebook page. If you just type in Rugby Muscle Athletes on Facebook, ask a question there before joining. Or you can ask a question in the reviews or in the comments below on the YouTube section. Thumbs up all around. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.